This video will show you how to replace your front bearing and hub assembly on a Toyota Matrix. This will be located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now to do this, we're going to have to safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so we can remove our front wheel. To remove the wheel, remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. Now that we have the wheel off, we're focusing directly in the center. We can see our brake rotor. In the center of this area, we have our axle nut. Now we have to use a 12.30mm socket to remove this. If you're using an air tool, typically it will come off fairly easily. If you're using a hand tool, you're going to either have to step on the brake and try to turn this counterclockwise, or carefully use a pry bar down towards the ground, preventing this from turning. Now directly in the center of the axle shaft, we have to lightly tap the axle free from our bearing hub. You can use some penetrant, of course. Now once you do see some movement from this area, we can continue on. We're going to be focusing on removing our brake caliper and bracket from this area. Prior to removing the brake caliper, let's push back our brake caliper piston. This can simply be done using a pry bar. We're going to go in the slot of our brake caliper. I'm trying to press up against the outer portion of my pad, and I'll gently start prying. We're going to pull the caliper outward. Make sure we have some movement here. There we are. Now that we have some movement, we're along the back side of our caliper here. We can see our 2 caliper bracket bolts. You do not need to remove your caliper slider bolts for this job. To remove our caliper bracket bolts, we'll be using an 18mm. I'm going to fully remove the first bolt and then start it back in a couple threads here. Now we'll make sure we hold on to the brake caliper and brake rotor as we continue the removal process of our brake caliper. Once you have the caliper out of place, just give the brake pads a quick inspection. We want to confirm they're not worn at an odd angle or damaged in any way. These look fine, so I'm going to hang them aside, putting no pressure on our flex hose. Let's go ahead and remove that brake rotor. Give that a close inspection, set it aside. The rotor's out of the way. Let's look along the rearward side of our steering knuckle. This is where we're going to find our outer tie rod end and the mounting hardware. If you have a cotter pin, go ahead and remove that and dispose of it. It's a good idea to replace those. And then we'll continue on to our castle nut. Now, as you can tell, my outer tie rod end has been replaced. Typically, you will be using a 17mm for your mounting nut. We're just going to remove that. We'll start it back on a couple threads. Continuing on, we need to break this free from the knuckle. We'll carefully tap on the steering knuckle itself, causing vibration. The tie rod should drop down, and the nut will prevent it from falling and hurting us. A thorough inspection of the outer tie rod end to confirm it's not damaged in any way. This looks good. Let's continue on with the hardware holding the knuckle to the front strut. For this hardware, we're using a 22mm for either side. I'm going to hold my bolt head and loosen my mounting nut. Let's leave this first mounting bolt in here. Just a quick inspection of our mounting hardware, we'll set it aside. Now we're down along the bottom here, we can start removing our lower ball joint from the lower control arm. You have 3 pieces of hardware for this, 2 17mm mounting nuts and 1 17mm mounting bolt. Now these are the last things holding this steering knuckle in place, so we need to be extremely careful while we're doing this. We're going to fully remove our first bolt here. We'll give it a quick inspection and then start it back in a couple threads. That's going to prevent this from falling out while we continue on to our 2 mounting nuts. Now we'll make sure we're holding on to that steering knuckle. We can fully remove that lower mounting bolt. At this point, we have to carefully lift the ball joint up and away from our lower control arm and pull it away from our axle shaft. Now let's get this over to the vise so we can work on our locking snap ring. Now I have this in my vise so I can start removing my snap ring. For the snap ring, typically you can use snap ring pliers. Our vehicle is extremely rusted and the snap ring is rotted. Our snap ring is very rusted and rotted, so I'm just going to have to remove it a different way. Now we can't get our snap ring out of here, but typically all you would do is take your snap ring pliers, grab onto the ears, squeeze them together, and you should be able to lift this up and out of position. After that, just give it a quick inspection. You can set it aside for recycling, and you'll make your way over to the press. Now we're over at the press, and as I mentioned, we could not remove our locking snap ring, so I'm going to go about this a little differently here. For you, either way, we still need to press out the center hub. That's the center circle we can see here, and that will be pushing out this larger portion that we can see on the outboard side. Now with that said, we need to have an area on our press for that hub to fall down and through. We're going to hold the knuckle itself. When we do so, we can hold along pretty much any flat area that you can gain access to. Let's do this as safely as possible. Take your time. Typically, you will have a backing plate that you're going to have to contend with. Be extremely careful not to cause any damage to anything along the way here. Now, since I only want to press on the center circle here, that's the hub circle, I have an adapter that fits up against that. We're not pressing up against the bearing. Now, if you have an adapter that can take up the space, you can use that as well. I'm just going to continue on, lightly applying pressure, and I'll add adapters as necessary. As we bring this down, let's make sure we're as even as possible. We want to try to center the pressure. Hand and eye protection at all times. Here we go. Seems like that's getting close here. There's our hub. Go ahead and set that aside for recycling. Now that I have that locking snap ring out of place, we're going to start pressing the bearing out as well. To press this out, it's coming out through the rearward or inboard side. Now I have this set up in my press, so I'm holding the knuckle. I have an area for the bearing to make its way down and through. And I'm going to be using an 1 13/16 socket to press directly up against my bearing. I want to try to get right up against my knuckle, but not necessarily hitting on the knuckle itself. Now let's line this up. We'll continue on slowly pressing this down and out of position. There it is, friend. Now that we have that out of there, the next thing we have to do is pay attention along the back side of the knuckle. We can see the port where the bearing needs to sit. You want to make sure you clean this port all the way down to the forward side. In this area, you can see that there is a ridge. That's where the bearing needs to press against. We can't have any debris here. Also, on this inboard side, where we had that snap ring, go ahead and make sure that that's clean as well. You can use a wire brush, some sandpaper, whatever you need. We'll be careful for any sharp edges, of course. Just a quick confirmation on that. This looks good. Now in the press, it's time to start installing our wheel bearing. For this, we're going to be coming through from the backside or the inboard side. I always like to use some anti-seize on the knuckle itself. This is going to work as a lubricant, helping us press the bearing in without causing any damage. You don't need very much here. Now we can install the brand new front wheel bearing. For this, you do not necessarily need to worry about a magnetic strip because we don't have ABS on this vehicle. If you did have ABS, you'd want to make sure you have the magnetic strip facing towards the inboard side. We'll carefully rest this in place. Now we're going to start pressing this down. When pressing it down, we can only press on the outer casing of the bearing, never on any of the inboard side. That's going to cause damage. So for that, I'm just going to use my original bearing. We have the casing area. That's what's going to go up against the new casing. We don't have to worry about pressing on the center with this, right? Continuing on, of course, I'm going to use an adapter as necessary. We're going to start pressing this straight down into the steering knuckle. You need to make sure it's going as straight as possible. If it's off kilter, it may bind and it might cause damage. Okay, so right there I can tell that I have pressure. I'm only going to apply a light amount of pressure here. And now while I have that pressure in place, I'm going to lightly tap with a hammer on the steering knuckle. We're causing vibration just in case it needs to be settled in. Now as you can tell, we should be fully set. Let's release pressure here. Once you have your adapter removed, have a quick look. We need to make sure we're completely seated all the way around and we can see the groove for our new snap ring. Prior to installing that snap ring, let's just go ahead and lift this up. We'll have a quick look from the other side. You can tell we're completely seated all the way around. This is exactly what we're looking for. Now I have my snap ring in my snap ring pliers. I'm squeezing. Now we'll get this in place. We're being aware of any pinch points. Once you feel as though you have it in the proper position, carefully take a hammer and punch and lightly tap it into the fully locked position. Be extremely careful not to cause any damage to that bearing. Okay, perfect. Now it's time to press the hub into the brand new bearing. Now for this, we have our brand new hub. We're going to bring it into our press. I'm going to have an adapter that presses directly against the center area here. We want to make sure we do not cause any damage to any of our lug studs. Let's continue on bringing our knuckle and bearing over into position. We're going to rest that bearing directly over our brand new hub. Now that I have this in here, we're going to have to carefully start pressing this down onto our brand new hub. When doing so, we're only pressing on the inner ring here, never on any other portion of that bearing. For this, if you don't have an adapter, you can use a 36mm socket. That should fit directly onto that. We'll continue on with any adapters we need to take up the space. And now we'll continue on by carefully pressing this down, slow and steady. As we do so, we're going to carefully pivot this, confirming we're not binding in any way. Make sure we're centered, everything's square. Perfect on that bearing race. You can see it's going down. I have no binding. This is a good sign. Okay, so right there I can tell that I am under pressure. We'll carefully take a peek in this area. We need to confirm we're properly seated. I'm also going to tap once again with my hammer on the knuckle itself. We just want to cause a little bit of vibration here. Let's go ahead and release pressure. Just want to make sure nothing falls over as we continue here. There we are, just a quick inspection of that. This looks good. Let's get it over to the vehicle. Now over at the vehicle, let's clean the splined area on our axle. Just going to use a wire brush. Thorough inspection for that. This looks good. We'll slide it out of the way. We need to clean the control arm next. Wire brush for this too. Now it's time to install our bearing with Knuckle. We'll go ahead and take this. We're going to put it in position. As we bring it over, the axle is going to slide in through the rear here, and then these lower studs will go into our lower control arm. I have my hardware. I'm just starting it on here. We have our upper hardware. We'll carefully start bringing the knuckle over to being in the proper position. Line up our mounting bolt ports. Now it's time to install those mounting bolts. With that hardware started in, let's continue on by snugging and torquing this hardware first prior to making our way down to the lower hardware next. We'll be torquing this to 162 foot-pounds. Now let's make our way to that ball joint hardware next. As we move to the lower ball joint hardware, we're going to start by tightening our 17mm bolts and then both of the 17mm mounting nuts afterward. After snugging all those, torque them to 66 foot-pounds. Let's get this outer tie rod in place. We'll pivot it as necessary. We have our castle nut. We want to make sure we have the slots facing up. Go ahead and start it on, bottom it out, and then torque that to 36 foot-pounds. Now, once you do have that torque to specification, we need to install a cotter pin. If it's not properly aligned, continue tightening until the very next slot on your cotter pin's aligned, and we can install that locking cotter pin. Prior to installing the brake rotor, let's apply some anti-seize to the mating surface. You don't need very much here, just make your way around. Now we can install our brake rotor. Prior to installing this, just have a quick look along the back, along the center area. We need to make sure the mating surface is clean. Let's go ahead and get this in place. Once you do have it in place, we'll continue on with one of our lug nuts holding this in place, and then we'll continue with that caliper. I like to use an axle nut as a spacer. As for the caliper, we're going to carefully take it so we can slide the brake pads over our brake rotor. Once you feel as though you have that in place, it's time for our 2 caliper bracket mounting bolts. Start them in, snug them up, and torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Okay, we've got our bolts here. I like to use some blue thread locker on these. Now we can remove our lug nut and our spacer, and we'll continue on with our axle nut. As far as the axle nut, you want to make sure that you put this in position, start it on by hand, and snug it with a hand tool, never with an impact tool, which could cause damage. Once we do have it snug, we're going to have to torque this to 159 foot-pounds. Now to torque this, we have the vehicle closer to the ground. We're going to be using a long pry bar diagonally across our lug studs. We want to make sure we have this as flat as possible so we do not cause any damage. That's going to prevent this from turning. Now once you do have it torqued, we need to make sure we lock this down so it cannot loosen up while we drive down the road. Looking at the axle shaft itself, you can see that we have a slot. We're going to use a hammer and punch and carefully drive our axle nut down into this area. Now, as you can tell, I do have that peened into the proper position here. Double check to make sure yours is properly secured, and we'll continue on with installing our wheel next. Now, one last quick inspection in this area, and we can reinstall our wheel. Now once you have your wheel in place, continue on to all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. We're going to bottom them out. Get the wheel safely back down on the ground and we'll be torquing each of them to 76 foot-pounds. I've got the wheel back on the ground and now I'm going to torque these to 76 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Now the next thing you need to do is take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.